Hi, Anne. Thank you for joining
Hi.
me once again. Everybody, this is Anne Tibbets, and she came up with the story and the concept for the murder mystery for Deep Space Nine, Holosuite Homicide. How are you?
I'm excellent. How are you today?
I'm great, great. Glad to be speaking with you. You are a longtime mystery writer and you are a huge Star Trek fan, so you seemed the perfect sort of merging of what we were looking for to write this. Can you tell us a little bit about what your process is for writing murder mysteries? Like, how do you come up with these concepts?
I think I start with the murder first, like who's gonna get axed. So whoever dies first is you start with the murder victim and then work your way backwards, actually, and then build the suspect list, who would want to kill them, and then the timeline and all that fun stuff. So it starts with the death, starts with the murder, and
Right,
then just gets more complicated from there.
right. And speaking of complications, so for this murder mystery, it takes place on Deep Space Nine. We decided to lean into the promenade. I mean, how did the Deep Space Nine setting sort of inform your process this time?
Well, because it's a space station and not a starship, we have endless possibilities of characters coming in and coming out. And it's not technically Starfleet either. It's
Right?
Bajoran run, so there we don't are not tied down to the rules and regulations of Starfleet. So and Cisco, who runs it jointly with the Bajorans, has always been a maverick and never really followed his own, always never really followed the rules himself. He's a bit of a maverick himself. So I really wanted to dive into the moral grayness of Deep Space Nine.
Sure, sure. Yeah, we hear a lot about that in reviews of the show, even.
Hmm.
And I don't think it's too much of a spoiler to say the victim that you find out right away, the victim is a Trill. You sort of started with that. What was so intriguing to you about that?
Well, you and I were actually on a call together, and I was trying to figure out who would be the best victim because that's where you start, is the victim. And if you had a Trill, basically you're going to have a victim who's two beings in one, which would complicate things considerably. And it sounded like a fun puzzle to construct, and I suppose I like making things harder on myself. So I figured the more complicated, the better, and the more fun.
This game incorporates Quark, and it incorporates Odo, and it incorporates Cisco and the Doctor, and all of these great characters. What is it about that series, about those characters, that you think makes it so beloved by fans?
I think it is that moral grayness and the aspect of the characters. Like you've got they were so well thought and constructed when they built the series. Kira, who's basically got PTSD and is a rebel at heart, who now has to be confined by working with Cisco, and Cisco, who's all of a sudden roped into a religious aspect, and Quark, who's got a heart of gold but is a bit of a shyster. Um, um, He'd be the last to admit that he has a heart of gold, but still,
Right.
it's the absolute complexity of the characters, and a security chief who sleeps in a bucket because he's actually a changeling. It's ridiculous how masterfully they were planned and just fully formed the moment from the first episode. You understood everybody completely. I think that's why people love it so much.
Yeah, and I have to say that part of this process is writing some documents in the voice of some of these characters, missives that the players receive from some of these folks. And the voices were so clear. It was
And distinct. Like
and
from the
distinct.
first episode, you understand them. And think about
Yes.
it with the symbiont with Dax, she's seven people. Like I think she's the eighth or sixth or seventh. I can't remember. But but she's like that's why Cisco calls her old man. And it just the complexity and very distinct voices.
So I know that you were also the writer for our Titan A murder mystery. Tell us a little bit about how this was different.
I think because Picard was a newer series, wasn't as familiar with the lore.
Uh-huh.
But because Deep Space Nine, I mean, I watched it back when it came out, when it first aired. Like that was appointment television before we had, streaming
Right.
or even TiVos, So it was appointment television that you watched religiously every week. So I think because there's nostalgia as well as just deep understanding of the universe because you've been with it so much longer that it held a special place for me anyway to delve that and feel like we were actually on the space station and dealing with these characters.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit more of that. Although I love Picard, he's still my captain, always will be my captain. But Deep Space Nine, as we would mention before, the characters are just so perfectly complicated.
So, as the story creator and sort of the murder concept creator, there's sort of this gap in time between when you hand over your story and your concept and your murder and going through all of the steps of design and production. So, when you finally got the finished product of Titan A, as a boxed game, what was that like?
It was beautiful, by the way, absolutely beautifully done. And it's almost, the only way I can describe it is as if everyone gets to play with my imaginary friends now, and to have other people,
Right.
call and text and email and say they had how much fun they had playing the game, and questions about it afterwards, and wanting
Uh-huh.
to know how it was, orchestrated and how the planning process worked. It's very surreal. It was surreal and very fulfilling, and to hear the positive feedback, and it's just so beautiful besides.
Well, Anne, thank you so much for your time. I know that our Kickstarter backers for our new Kickstarter are going to be interested to hear some of the behind the scenes, so I really appreciate you taking this time to speak to us today.
Always a pleasure, and I'll take any opportunity to talk about Star Trek.
All right. Thanks, Anne.